Every bleeding video, this Andy guy raves on about different ways to get hold of a GPU. And you guessed it, I'm going to do it all over again because there's yet another way of getting hold of one, and for a semi-reasonable price. The only issue is you have to buy a complete system. Kind of. Let's do this. Oh, I can't believe I forgot to buy a bloody mouse. If only there was a Champion Series gaming mouse that I could pair with my brand new Corsair K70 RGB TKL keyboard.
Excuse me, there is the new Corsair Sabre RGB Pro Champion Series gaming mouse. Built for and tested by top esports professionals.
Where's that voice coming from?
With an 18,000 DPI optical sensor, capable of up to 8,000 Hz hyperpolling and ultra-responsive quick-strike buttons. Pair it with that keyboard of yours and you too can hang out with the pros.
Really?
Well, not you, Andy.
Oh.
But everyone else can. Click the link in the description to find out more.
Now, if you've not been in the PC enthusiast sector for very long, you may have no idea on what this actually is. If you have, however, you'll probably be able to spot exactly what it is from a first glance. This is in fact an Intel NUC. Intel's attempt at making a next unit of computing, or NUC. It all started with Intel wanting to build the ultimate tiny PC. And I know what you're thinking, Andy, that box next to you is frankly huge. Intel didn't do a very good job with this tiny PC thing now, did they? Well, this is actually the fancy pantsy press pack, so sorry guys, it's all mine and you're never actually going to see this in the wild, or so I'm told. What's inside though? Well, that's the the important part. The issue with going small form factor generally comes down to heat, which then throttles performance, or going down the laptop route, which, while I guess it does give you the ability to transport the system about freely, they aren't exactly upgradable in the big sense of the word, and could be argued that, you know, they're not as powerful as a fully fledged system. So that's where NUC was created, and kind of started, I guess, more of a work / education / business type system, but it's kind of progressed from there. I mean, it meant that they were perfect for plonking on the back of your monitor and working away, but were never really aimed at gamers, especially considering that they didn't have a dedicated GPU, which is kind of needed for gaming, or so I'm told. Well, that is where this comes in, the Intel NUC 11 Extreme. A pint-sized powerhouse giving us the performance that we all crave with a GPU that we crave even more, without taking up huge amounts of kind of space on your desk. I mean, look at it, it's tiny. And the way that they managed to get it so tiny is down to the NUC way of doing things. Instead of your typical system with a motherboard featuring a CPU socket that you put your processor into, this is actually kind of a all-in-one and comes as a complete unit. So let's talk about the size of it, because I mean that is a really, really important thing. The case comes in at 8 litres. 8 litres, that is crazy small, but being small doesn't mean that you have to compromise. This still features all of the connectivity options that any gamer would need, plus a few extra. It has Thunderbolt 4 ports, 2 of them in fact. It can actually come with Wi-Fi 6E, it's got 2.5G Ethernet and a ton of USBs, and yes, it also has RGB. I mean, now it does look beastly. So let's open it up, as another kind of big point of the Intel NUC 11 Extreme is, you know, that it's extremely versatile in terms of upgrading your GPU, storage or memory. Obviously it does come in a variety of different SKUs depending on your budget, and it's actually branded as a kit, meaning that Intel want you to open it up, they want you to upgrade it. I mean, many small form factor systems that are purpose built, meaning unlike a conventional PC, make it kind of difficult to take apart or to open up because they don't want you fiddling inside. The NUC 11 Extreme is kind of the polar opposite, and once you've taken the sides off, you do actually get a real kind of sense of the space inside. I mean, inside our one is the Asus RTX 3060 Dual, making it the perfect machine for high kind of frame rate 1080p gaming, or even a little bit of 1440p goodness, with all of the latest Nvidia features like ray tracing to make your games look stunning, and DLSS for upscaling, meaning you can run games on higher settings without it running like a sack of spuds. Now I guess the biggest competitor to something like this is the likes of the Magnus One from Zotac, which incorporates a very kind of similar structure. The beauty of Zotac is that they actually make ITX GPUs, meaning they can design their PC around the graphics card. whereas the NUC actually houses a full-size one, and with the amount of room we have here, it does look like we could potentially put something a bit beefier inside, if that's your plan, maybe at a later date, when you can get hold of a different GPU. But for now, you have to remember, most consumers will keep their systems for 5 years or longer, and within that time, they may only upgrade the GPU, as that often becomes the limiting factor as new games come to market. Now, a big stopping point with anything powerful that aims to be small is heat. It's kind of the arch enemy of any gamer, as it can limit your frame rate due to thermal throttling on both the GPU and the CPU. And Intel think that they have you covered with a triple fan array of 92mm fans at the top, working as a kind of chimney-based system, pulling the heat out and expelling it straight out the top. Simple physics really, heat rises, so placement, well, it's pretty spot on. Also inside we find a 650 watt 80 plus gold rated modular power supply. I know what you're thinking, a normal system with an RTX 3060 is basically at the limit of power draw, but this isn't a normal system. Instead, the i9 11900KB processor is only a 65 watt part. So unlike a conventional 11900K with its 125 watt TDP, doesn't require as much juice, freeing up those watts to pump into your GPU. So I'd be pretty confident in being able to put in a 3070 Ti, or maybe even a little bit higher, though you are going to be restricted by the length of the card, and of course, the girth. I mean, width. Keep it family friendly, Andy. Now, of course, the 11900KB does have some drawbacks compared to its desktop counterpart, in that it only boosts up to a measly 4.9 GHz compared to 5.3 GHz on the 11900K. But for a gamer, is that really going to make that much of a difference? Probably not. The other cool thing about how the main part of the system is laid out is the, let's call it, CPU portion. It's more like a kind of large add-in card and looks more like a GPU than anything, but with mass amounts of connectivity ports, including HDMI. Now, the big reason behind this is that these systems can be bought as a bare bones, which kind of defeats the point of this video of, being able to get one with a GPU because of the crisis surrounding those. But it means you can buy the system without a GPU and then whack one in if you have one maybe laying around, or you manage to get lucky getting one elsewhere. Again, freedom. So taking the all-important GPU out to get more of a view of that add-in style CPU motherboard quasi-small form factor doodad, technical word, we can see that includes a blower style fan. It's just kind of situated just behind here. Now, I normally worry about noise, especially with blower style fans. I mean, we all remember the experiences that we had with blower style graphics cards, those horrid kind of AMD cards back in the day. I mean, heck, even Nvidia fell into that trap. But being only a 65 watt TDP processor, I'm not worried. You're worried. I mean, it's quite a clever way of doing it though, as the blower fan actually includes this kind of little add-in cover, which helps draw the hot air away from the PC and exhaust it out the back. And this sits kind of nestled between the NUC itself and the GPU. So taking this cover and consequently the blower style fan off, we can actually get our first glimpse, once we remove this, of kind of what's going on just behind here. So we get our first glimpse of the SSD and the memory, which again, can all be upgraded if you wish. It's got 16 gig of 3200 MHz memory, which are in fact SODIMM, so laptop memory, which kind of helps to keep that overall size down. And also included is a 512 gig Sabrent Rocket 4.0 PCI Express Gen 4 SSD, something that actually does generate quite a bit of heat. So maybe, just maybe I am a little bit worried now. So with it all now stripped down, hopefully it gives you a bit of an idea behind what makes the NUC tick, and more importantly, how you can get a fully fledged PC with that all-important graphics card. And that's where, as I put this together, I'm going to drop some knowledge bombs on you. Are you ready? So we released a video recently talking about how to get hold of a GPU through a variety of different ways, including buying a system from an SI or system integrator. And that's kind of where the NUC actually kind of falls into, because, well, essentially, a bunch of retailers sell this as a bare bones system, but most retailers, as well as independent computer builders like Simply NUC, who would have guessed that name, and Scan in the UK, well, they now have stock come in all the time of GPUs and have kind of huge back orders for both their retail component side of their business as well as the system integrator side. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I know the ins and outs of running an online store, other than store.eteknix.com, where we sell loads of really cool stuff, like our handy dandy kind of toolkit, but it makes sense, at least from a business point of view, that you're going to put GPUs into systems first, right? Instead of selling them as separate components. I mean, there's more money to be made on markup of other components, whereas selling just a GPU as just a GPU, well, it just becomes a GPU. There's nothing more really to it. What I'm trying to get at is that essentially it's just from my very small amount of research, it seems that buying a system, well, that could actually make it easier to obtain a GPU than trying to get one on its own. Hopefully that kind of makes sense to you. I mean, it does to me at the very least. And you know, I wrote this script, smile intently. Oh, that's the stage direction. So with it all built, let's get it powered up and see, and more importantly, in my opinion, hear what it's all about. I mean, first up, we're on to a winner. It has RGB, and a fair amount of it at that. We all know RGB makes things better, so that's easily an extra 20 frames per second right there. Now, not only is there RGB on the underside though, there's a funky skull that kind of lights up at the front, and I'm sure that Intel has some form of software to be able to control this to your heart's content. So what about the BIOS? Well, inside it all looks pretty simple. You can find information on kind of what's inside the PC. You can adjust things like your storage and your LAN settings. You can even drill down a little bit. There's tabs for cooling where you can change the profile and see what the actual fan speed is, as well as going into performance, which kind of doesn't really tell you much, but you can actually drill down a little bit further into here. So enabling and disabling hyperthreading, or you can come out, go back and go into memory, and you can actually set XMP profiles and change timings. So there's not really much in terms of the general sense of overclocking, but to be fair, I don't think you're really buying this system for that anyway. So booting into Windows, which is worth noting that it is actually an extra cost if you are speccing this up, we can finally get in and see how it actually performs in some games. So first game is Call of Duty Warzone, a personal favourite of mine, and we are just in a lobby at the moment, but we've got pretty much everything maxed out. We have got ray tracing turned on, we have got DLSS on as well, and we are getting anywhere between sort of 120 to 150 frames per second. So not bad overall. We're getting some nice shots in here as well. Hopefully I don't die. So next game up is Far Cry 6. I haven't actually played this one yet. Apparently I need to stay out of sight, but we are on ultra settings. We are at 1440p and we're getting 72 frames per second, which isn't bad overall. I mean, the game looks pretty damn nice, even without any form of kind of ray tracing enabled or anything like that. And the problem is when you are playing a game like this with no sound, I have no idea what's going on. And I'm probably gonna die. Yeah, I mean, her kicking like that probably isn't the wisest move. So next game up, Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I know it's one that you guys love to see because everyone uses it for a benchmark. We are at 1440p. We're on the highest settings. I mean, lighting and stuff like that on this game looks absolutely amazing. We're getting 115 frames per second and we have got ray tracing set to quality. So everything's looking pretty good. Now, one thing I do want to make clear with this system is maybe the mic's picking up a little bit of the noise from the system. It's a little bit kind of on the noisy side compared to, I guess, your conventional system, but for a small form factor build, it's nothing that I'd really worry about, and you are going to get very, very similar from any ITX system. So again, 110 frames per second, things are looking pretty decent if I can keep my eye actually on the game and do what I've got to do and talk to you guys at the same time. So lastly, we are looking at Dirt 5. We are at 1440p, we have everything set to high and we have got ray tracing shadows on, and we're getting sort of 60 to 65 frames per second. There's a few little dips here and there, but Dirt 5 looks absolutely stunning. Just the reflections, the visuals, just kind of everything overall. Again, you should hopefully through the microphone be able to pick up a little bit of noise from the system, but once you've got headphones on or you've got your speakers blaring and really sort of, you know, enjoying the immersive side of the game, you shouldn't really have too much of an issue with sort of focusing on the noise of the actual system itself. So yeah, overall everything looks absolutely amazing in all the games that we've tested, including Dirt 5, which I'm now currently getting 68, 72 frames per second, so pretty happy overall. And it's always fun trying to play a game and talk to you guys at exactly the same time without making myself look like I can't actually play games. So there is that. Now, during gameplay, I will admit, it was a little bit noisy, but I kind of expected it, as the noise doesn't really come from the GPU, it's more from the CPU with that blower style fan. Checking the thermals, I'm actually quite surprised. I mean, just looking at it now, CPU is at 71 degrees, GPU is at 70 degrees. So I guess there's a bit of a trade-off with having good thermals but noisier acoustics, but giving you max performance overall, even when it's throttling. To really put this kind of to the test, we were going to run the likes of Cinebench R20, which would really kind of hammer that CPU, but I do feel that that's a bit of an unfair way of doing things. So instead, I honestly think gaming is the best way to do it. So yes, it's a little bit noisy, but you do have to remember this is the top tier i9 processor in here, which I do kind of feel is a little bit mismatched compared to the RTX 3060 GPU. I mean, if it was me, I'd be plumping more for the i7, which in gaming should see very, very similar performance, but give you a bit more cash in your pocket, which maybe you could upgrade the GPU to something a little bit more powerful. And it should, in theory, reduce the overall noise, as in theory, it should run slightly cooler anyway, even though it is very similar in TDP. So, does the NUC do what it sets out to do? I mean, yes. They, being Intel, made a small form factor system that can rival the big guys, because essentially it's the same as a desktop PC, but with some clever design choices like using SODIMM memory and that interesting cooling system along the top. Honestly, in my opinion, I love the design of it. It's small, it's sleek, but it comes without restrictions, at least in terms of upgrading the memory, the SSD, and the GPU. Speaking of GPUs, this is just another option for those desperately looking to build a PC and kind of facing a bit of a stumbling block when it comes to the GPU, with them, being out of stock everywhere. And yes, you will find this whole system isn't the cheapest thing on the market, but it's on the market, and that's what's important right now. Speaking of the market, obviously there's not much point me talking about GPUs and where to buy them, as I do have a whole video going through all of that, and by the time you actually watch this video, it will be kind of old news. But just from my own research, these are available at the time of filming and can be bought in a variety of different configurations with a variety of different GPUs. So I guess what I'm trying to say is be fast before, my little secret gets out. Either way, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know exactly what to do, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.